Hey loves, it's Britt, and in this video I wanted to talk about Saturn conjunct to Pluto in Synastry. You guys have requested this one a lot, so let's dive into this intense karmic aspect in Synastry. So this one seems to almost always coincide with a big life lesson being learnt by both people, but in a different way. But Liz Green says that in her book, Saturn, it has like a little synastry part at the end. And she says, that Saturn and Pluto are actually kind of similar in their energies, right? I mean, similar but different, but they're both like these very serious, potentially very repressed, fearful parts of ourselves, right? And so when we have this conjunction in synastry, it can show that a lot is being brought up for both people. So the Saturn person is very aware of the Pluto person's power. They actually kind of see them as like this magnetizing or even like sexual, influential person. And they can kind of seek to, like, in some cases, repress them, or in other cases, like, ground them or help them let go of patterns that are no longer serving them. So there can be a little bit of like a daddy energy coming from the Saturn person, kind of appearing older or more mature, less emotional, more of the grounded person, trying to help out the Pluto person who is, obsessive or has all these desires or is just, blinded by passion. The Saturn person can kind of seek to ground them. But also, like in a sexual sense, if this is a sexual relationship, I think that sometimes the Saturn person can feel a little bit intimidated or like insecure at the Pluto person's like power and sexuality, and they could even outright like feel like an inadequacy, especially if Pluto is like, or sorry, their Saturn is like contacting Venus or Mars or something. They could definitely feel triggered by the Pluto person's like intensity or sexuality, and it could like trigger a feeling of being inadequate or repressed in that area. So that's one manifestation of it. Now, the Pluto person senses the Saturn person too, although they can definitely feel like they are kind of like that old daddy Saturn archetype, like they're trying to mold them into a certain fashion or a certain way. And now a lot of this will be shown by the sign and the house placement of the natal Saturn person's Saturn and the natal Pluto person's Pluto. So that's how you can get more to the story, is by like actually looking at the sign in the house that it's expressing through. So I've only ever experienced this synastry aspect with my Pluto because nobody alive has Pluto in Pisces, which I have Saturn in Pisces. So I've only ever had it with somebody's Saturn in Scorpio to my Pluto in Scorpio at 29 degrees. So I think if you're born in like early 1985, I have this with you. I might have the dates wrong, but I think it's around that time period. So in my experience, there is a very strong magnetizing energy and almost a feeling of like soul knowing that there is some sort of lesson to be learned with this relationship. It feels big. It feels, I mean, with like the karmic connotation of Saturn and the obsessive influence of Pluto, it definitely feels like a big one. Like you almost get a little bit like your heart can skip a beat because of how intense this feels and how much growth is possible. Now, I think the two people can also run away from this because it might be too intense if you're not ready to face these soul lessons that you've come here to learn. I think that more common than not, people will run away from an aspect like this, especially if it's in a very close orb, because it's heavy, it's serious. It's not like a super fun, like fifth house, like vibe. So it's interesting because if you do have kind of like a fifth house or Jupiter synastry to like balance this out, it can really add another layer of depth and soul growth and like, yeah, like a real fadedness to the interaction. And what can also happen is that the Pluto person, because of the Saturn person's influence, can undergrow or undergo, sorry, not undergrow, that should be a word, but I don't believe that it is. They can undergo like a transformation of like, Pluto is also like what needs to die within us, right? What is like a karmic or like, it's like a sewage energy in our field, like something that is, not worth holding on to. It could be an emotional pattern, it could be a sexual pattern, it could be a karmic, like family line generational curse or something. It could be something financial, but whatever it is, it's like a sludgy energy in our field that can need to be transformed into a higher light. It's like the power of transmutation, taking this sludge and turning it into gold. That's like the process of Pluto. So the Saturn person can have a lot to do with transforming the Pluto person and helping them kind of deepen their energy around the area of their Pluto. So like Pluto in the 8th house in Scorpio, it could be something to do with sex. This could be the relationship that deepens your experience of a sexual connection. Maybe it's making things, you don't want a lighthearted casual fling anymore once you have this connection. And actually in any house or sign, it could have that effect, I think. Some of the other effects, it could make the Pluto person more like conservative or more like with their money, right? Like less spendy, like there's a seriousness activated, and Pluto can represent our resources or shared resources. So there's something very serious going on here to the Pluto person, and they might resist it because like if they don't have a lot of respect for the Saturn person, they're going to be like, screw you, I'm not going to transform this part of myself, I'm not going to like listen to you judgmental daddy Saturn. But if there is a respect for the Saturn person, and even if there isn't a respect for the Saturn person, the transformation is going to be unavoidable. Now, you can walk away from a relationship if it's super toxic, but there can still be a transformation that'll happen within you with this aspect. And now what can happen to the Saturn person, though, is like they can realize something to do with, the quality of time. Saturn rules time, Saturn rules age, and it rules like your karmic lessons. And so the Pluto person is really teaching the Saturn person too about the futility of trying to control everything. And the Saturn person might eventually realize that no matter how hard they try to hold on to this Pluto person, or how hard they try to avoid aging or transforming in the area of their Saturn, the transformation is unavoidable. And so the Pluto person can really wake up the Saturn person to like let go of repressions, let go of fears, let go of old blocks. Now, that is not a comfortable process by any means. So the Saturn person can resent the Pluto person a lot, and the Pluto person can resent the Saturn person a lot too. So it is a really tough contact, but as much as it sounds difficult, it is actually very binding and helpful as far as our soul lessons go, and soul growth associated with, like I said, the sign and house placement of the Saturn person's Saturn and the sign and house placement of the Pluto person's Pluto. You can't learn these lessons without this person, really. I mean, this is one of the most grounding influences you can have in synastry to really master that area of your life. And of course, yeah, you can learn it without them, but this is sure going to make it unavoidable or like a forced learning process, which is why people can walk away from this type of aspect, because it is extremely heavy. Now, some people might actually like this because of like the seriousness involved, like Capricorn energy, love to work out stuff, right? Or even like highly plutonic people can appreciate the stability of this aspect because it really does have that same sticky feeling as other Saturn aspects. And in some ways, even more so. This is actually quite a common aspect in synastry, and also in the composite chart. This seems to be like one of the most common aspects in the composite chart, which I'm not talking about that in this video. I'll make a different video for that, but yeah, it definitely seems to be a thing. So like karmic transformation. That's what we could title this video. We're taking the energy of Saturn with Pluto. And it's not an easy aspect, and it's actually not easy to describe. Like, I don't even know if that made any sense at all, what I was trying to say there, but I did my best. You guys are asking for it, and there you go. Trying to think of anything else. I think that this really could awaken the personal power of both individuals, because Saturn is like what you must do in this lifetime. And the Pluto person will force you to face your fears in that area and call you a little biatch if you don't, you know? And then vice versa, the Saturn person is forcing the Pluto person to kind of face, you know, their repressed energy as well, and their unconscious compulsiveness, and kind of ground that down. So it can be very, very helpful for growth to have this aspect. It creates a deepening, a seriousness, and a feeling of like lessons being learned together that can bond the people for a lifetime. So even after you break up, or after this lesson has been learned, there's still that feeling of that person being in your energy and being a part of you forever. Like something that conspired from this relationship is something so huge in your field that, like, yeah, you never forget that. So yeah, I'd love to know your experience of this contact in synastry. If you've had it, I'd love to know how it was for you. If you've had a long-term relationship with this one, like maybe the themes of it, I'd love to hear about it if you feel like sharing. But yeah, sending you all the love, you guys. Thank you for the requests. Keep those requests coming, and we will talk soon. Bye.